Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
All right, GSMC Football Podcast here on the GSMC Podcast Network. It is episode 50 with me and Brice. Who would have thought? Who would have seen it coming? Wow. Episode 50, man. We've been doing it for a while, and, you know, it's been getting better and better as each week goes by. Brice, I got to know, man, how you feeling? Episode 50. It's going to be a crazy one, too, because a lot of things just happened in the NFL that you couldn't have told me what were going to happen beforehand.
Oh, man, you know, it feels good to get episode 50, man. You know, these type of episodes, you just put little milestones by, you know, as a podcast or any type of show, because that means that you made it 50 episodes. If you did a show a week, which we do, that's almost a full year, couple of 52 weeks in a year. So almost a full year of podcasting with you and everything. Really enjoyed the ride. Really enjoyed everything, man. And feeling good, man. Feeling good. But yeah, man, a lot of stuff happened in the NFL this past weekend, man. Definitely. But before we get into that, man, how are you doing? How are you, sir?
I'm living good. I'm feeling even better. I was very nervous for the last 48 hours was I was a nervous wreck. And then Sunday happened, and, you know, I think I'm just good. That's all I can say. I am emotionally good. That is it.
Yes, sir. That's all we can ask for. So what's on the slate today, sir? What are we going to talk about?
Well, we got some NFC, AFC stuff going on. You know what the usual, how we do it here on Tuesday afternoons, Tuesday evenings, Tuesday mornings. Because whenever you hear it, you'll hear it on Tuesday. So, number one, biggest thing here for sure. The Ravens lost again, and not great. Not a great loss. Another chance to take home a game-winning drive for Lamar, and he just couldn't get it done. So on the AFC side, big wins from Indianapolis, of course, and Tennessee. So both in the same division. What are the chances of both of them making the playoffs, in your opinion, Brice?
I'd give it a... Honestly, AFC is pretty stacked. I'll right now, I'll give it 50-50 right now for both. It's possible, you know. If the Colts, you know, in their situation, you know, this is why they brought Phillip Rivers in, because they feel like roster-wise, they can be one of the best teams in the AFC. They just need a quarterback. And, you know, Phillip hasn't necessarily played the greatest, but they are where they are. And then Tennessee, you know, they started off really well. They struggled. Then they got a big win against Baltimore. So they're going to be battling basically for the division all year, but also helps because they're also kind of fighting for the wild card as well. So you never know, man. You never know. But I think 50-50 would be a good range, I would think, for both of them to make it, just because, you know, the AFC wild card picture is very competitive right now. How about you? Where do you see their chances of both making the playoffs?
Well, considering it's a 7-man or a 7-team playoff structure thus far, I hear that they might go to 8, but I don't think it's really going to be a thing. Personally, I feel like the Titans are a team that just knows how to get it done in a weird way. Like, I don't really know exactly how to say that, other than I just feel like they know what they're doing at times, and they seem to just have the Ravens' number this far, and you can see it on the field that the Ravens just didn't know what to do with that team for a little while, and all the same issues still apply with the receivers and Lamar and not being able to really throw it downfield as much as you would hope to see in basically his second year. really at the quarterback position. So there's that. A.J. Brown is a problem. A.J. Brown is their best target. And after that, it's just the Derrick Henry show. You can't stop both. Like, that's what we're learning. Like, their two-man game with, of course, Derrick Henry, and then getting A.J. Brown the ball at all times is going to win you a lot of games, especially in the AFC where a lot of teams are not strong in the secondary, or like everybody has holes in the NFL. Like, that's per fact. No team is 100% perfect. But as we've seen plenty enough time so far, that you can be pretty good if you have if you're strong at the best things that you're at. So that sounds redundant. If you're strong at things like pass defense and your offense can maintain, the possession a long time, you'll probably be pretty good on most football days, right? Like, we're seeing it right now as the Rams play. The Rams are really good at keeping possession, and their defense is really good at, stopping people at the line of scrimmage and bringing out pressure. They have the best player in football at the defensive line, so that helps a lot too, But, yeah, I think that the Colts are starting to hit strides right now. I was always a fan of Michael Pittman coming out of college, and he's definitely showing it now in the last 3 games. At least fantasy purpose-wise, he's gotten at least 3 receptions, 3 looks, and he's turned it all into really great things. And he's playing next week against the same team that gave up 7 receptions for 103 yards against them. So that is going to be pretty interesting, and that is the Tennessee Titans, because both of them go up against one another. So, Brice, if you were a betting man or a man, what would you say is the defining factor for a Indianapolis Titans game, and who are you looking for as far as the victor?
The defining factor to me is just time, possession, and turnovers. I mean, that's really how a lot of games come down to, but for them especially, because both teams want to run the football. We know the Colts have 3 running backs they can go to: Hines, Taylor, and he's not coming off my tongue right now. There's someone else they also go to, but Hines and Taylor were usually the main 2, but there's someone else. And then on Tennessee, Derrick Henry. With Derrick Henry, King Henry. They're going to try to pound you with King Henry. And obviously turnovers, which to me I think comes down to the quarterbacks. For the most part, Ryan Tannehill has not really been a turnover machine. He's usually been pretty good at protecting the ball. Usually Phil Rivers is the guy that you're usually most concerned with. The reason why the Colts had their success against Tennessee was that defensively they were able to shut down Derrick Henry and now allow Tannehill to get any big plays over the top. But they were also able to establish a running game, keep the ball out of Tennessee's hands, and then Phil Rivers made key and timely throws when he needed to. So that's going to be the formula for both sides, I think, again, in this game. Because both teams, I feel like are built similarly. I think they have both really good head coaches. I just think it just comes down to who executes the best in the game. So when it comes to a victor, in these types of games, we know if the Colts win, they have the leg up now on the division. They have the tiebreaker. They swept Tennessee, and Tennessee would have to finish with a record to win the division, or else the Colts have won the division. Where now, if Tennessee wins, it's by a conference record, which, that would be the next tiebreaker if they did happen to finish with the same record. And so, to me, I think with both teams, coming into it, et cetera, I think that if I was a betting man, I would think Tennessee would would have a tie 1-1 and win, because if they win that game right now, in terms of conference record, the Titans are 5-3 and the Colts are 3-3. So they would technically have the tiebreaker on the Colts if they did get the win. So it's a really big game for Tennessee next week, because they need that game, and then they'll be in the driver's seat. Plus, they both have the same record right now. And obviously that 1-game lead going into the final home stretch of the season is going to be super important for them going forward. So if it was me, I would probably go with Tennessee to go. I think this win against Baltimore is going to get them back on track. They were able to establish a few things. And sometimes you just need a win to sometimes get stuff going into get yourself in the right place as a team. And I think, remember, Tennessee got hot at the end of last year. They were hot in the beginning of this year. Now, depending on how the season ends, may be determining how dangerous they could be going forward as well.
Yeah, I understand. I see where you're coming from. I'm still kind of out on Tennessee, man. That defense is concerning. It really is the same scheme from last year in the like in the playoffs and stuff. It's just not clicking. A lot of guys are in and out of the lineup, a lot of injuries, but I just don't see it. I think Indianapolis probably has the defense and like a playoff level defense to put that in perspective. And, you know, I know Phillip Rivers he's been kind of hot and cold, and he had a weird game, obviously, as well, to where, you know, I don't really know how to explain it. Like, the Colts have weird games. Phillip Rivers has weird games, and they ended up coming out with a big win. If they didn't win, I don't even know what the conversation is right now about the Colts personally, but they got the win, and their defense is good. Like, their defense is good, even though they gave up 28 first half points. I don't think that's a detriment to what they are or what they can be to certain teams. So, yeah, I just don't see it with Tennessee in order to stop Indianapolis from doing what they want to do, because they have a lot of decent receivers. And if T.Y. can actually stay healthy and you look at everybody else around, they have some really good tight end mixtures. They have, of course, Michael Pittman out there running routes. They still have Zach Pascal. And, you know, Naheem Hines has been really good for them. All their running backs have been good besides, you know, Jonathan Taylor. Even though Jonathan Taylor had his first decent game in like 9 games. So, you know, go figure. You know, we'll figure it out with him. But I'm a fan of this Colts team, and I think they can do some things. I was a fan of the Colts last year, too. So this is kind of more on brand for me. But I think they're really well coached. Not to say that Tennessee isn't, but I don't think Tennessee's defense can take them over the edge.
Yeah, I definitely understand. I mean, that's the major thing with Tennessee is just a pass rush to me. And then I think losing Logan Ryan this past year was really big for them because he was the leader of that defense, and he was the guy who kind of manned the secondary. So now you don't have a pass rush, then you lose the lead of your back end. Sometimes that can lead to some struggles on the defensive end. So I could definitely understand that. The only difference I think we could maybe say in terms of big play offense, Tennessee is more of you would maybe say a bigger play offense. Whereas, you know, the Colts are more of a kind of not dink and dunk, I would say, but just they're more methodical with their approach, even though Tennessee could do that too. But the Colts do have the better defense. The Colts have been top 10 in a lot of defensive categories this entire year for a reason. So, you know, it really just comes down because it's two contrasting styles, I guess you could say, going head to head. And so that game next week, like I said, it's going to be huge. It's going to be huge because it's going to determine who wins probably maybe the AFC South. And then we'll have to see, you know, whoever loses, we got to see what the rest of the AFC does as well.
Yeah, and that's definitely for sure. Real quickly, where would you say, I don't know, what do you think the Texans' mindset is right now? You know, they just got a pretty good game out of Deshaun Watson, probably his best game as a player this year. After coming off probably his worst game. Give me like your 2-minute spiel on the Texans right now, because they have no draft picks. It's kind of like Houston basketball. Like the city of Houston is going through some things in sports in the past year and some change. Like, it's not been fun.
I mean, well, I've told you at the beginning of the year, I feel like Bill O'Brien ruined his team. Made horrible decisions, made some signings, some trades that just did not need to be made, and it put the team and set the team back. You see it clearly with the talent. You see clearly what's going on. You're hearing J.J. Watt wants out because he doesn't want to be part of a rebuilding process. So he might be gone, and you know, they're going to have to kind of start this thing over. But at least the one thing about this rebuilding process for them is that they have a quarterback. So they're not having to sit here and say, okay, you just got to build the rest of the roster. You're right. They don't have draft picks, but you don't know. They might make some moves. You know, Brandon Cook's been traded how many straight off seasons in a row? 2, 3? This might be the 4th. You never know. So to me, I think, you know, it really depends on what they want to do. They just have to they still have to upgrade the offensive line, which has been an issue the whole time Deshaun's been there. They have to get better on the back end defensively, and they have to find more of a consistent running game. And I think, if they can make some moves, maneuver, try to get some type of picks back for certain players, they may be able to do a little bit of something. Whoever the new regime is, they're going to come in with an ideal. I feel like if they don't end up getting, actually, this is a quick take. I would not be surprised if Houston goes into the college ranks because they have Deshaun Watson and because we know Deshaun can run those very innovative offenses like you see in Arizona, because that may be a place, even though we talk about, certain coaches might not leave. Just got to throw it out there again. You never know, depending on what happens in Oklahoma or depending what happens at Notre Dame, whatever, you might see Houston dip into the college ranks a little bit. Says, let's try to switch it up. Let's try to be more innovative. Let's try to be younger and see what that does, especially after just doing what happened with Bill O'Brien. I feel like they may want a completely different approach from a front office perspective, from a coaching perspective.
Right. Well, we're going to take our first break, and then coming out, we're going to continue on this AFC conversation. GSMC will be right back.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, GSMC Football Podcast, we're back, and we're going to continue on this AFC journey around the American Football Conference. No one ever calls it the American. No one ever says the full, abbreviation, like the whole thing, like in any sport, right? Except for basketball, because there's really no, there's no short form of the Eastern Conference or Western Conference. Like, even in baseball, they say, like, the NLDS when they're in, like, the playoffs. But in basketball, it's always the Western Conference Finals or the Eastern Conference Finals. In the NFL, it's always the, national or, the NFC Championship game or the, it's just funny. It's just something I thought about. But AFC had a pretty interesting in-divisional game, right? Chiefs versus the Raiders. I believe the Raiders were at home. And it was really good. It was a really good game. Came down to the last drive, which if you put the last drive in Mahomes' hands, you might as well just call it a day, right? He might as well just pack it up. Because once you saw him step up in the pocket, you knew it was over. I feel like everybody watching at home, everybody who was at the game, actually, there's no fans at Raiders Stadium, so nobody was at the game. So everybody at home, or if you're on the sideline, right, I have to imagine that they just assume that, okay, Mahomes is just going to win the game now as soon as he stepped up in the pocket. Brice, what did you take away from that pretty impressive win for Kansas City, knowing that they already threw a pick in the first half and things were getting kind of weird?
Well, I think it's a very impressive win for Kansas City, especially going into their big game next week against Tampa Bay. It's good for them to get that win back against Las Vegas. Patrick Mahomes still look good. This is why a lot of people still predict them to be the favorites in the AFC, because of the fact that they could score with any team. Patrick Mahomes is the quarterback. They have weapons across the board. Chiefs are one of those teams. It's kind of like New England. They got to a point where New England, where it's like, Yeah, they can be beaten, but it's like you would never want to say, oh, that's the team that's going to beat them. It's almost just like we're going to have to say Kansas City until somebody beats them. And I think that's kind of where it is. Now, I will say, Las Vegas beat them the first game. And, like I said, if Patrick Mahomes did not score on the last drive, they would have beaten the second game. So we may have to start looking at Las Vegas as a more serious, maybe contender, because they went toe-to-toe with Kansas City. Now, this could just be a matchup thing where they just match up really well with Kansas City, because that means that they met a third time in the playoffs, hey, we know Kansas City can lose this game because we've seen the two games already. But to me, I feel like, honestly, this shows me that, hey, Las Vegas, they can play with the big boys. I feel like they could play against Pittsburgh if they played a game. They could play against Kansas City, because there really isn't a team in the AFC, I guess you could say, that's dominant, so to say. And the most dominant team is Kansas City. And like I said, we've seen what the Raiders have done against them. But Kansas City, in general, they should be the favorites. They're the most talented offensive team in the league. Defensively, I don't think they're ever going to be an elite defense, but they're going to be a good enough defense that can create plays, create turnovers, and that's what's going to help them out. And I feel like that's what's going to be the key to them if they're going to go far. But, overall, I think it was a great game. Both teams put it all on the line. You saw that, both teams were battling back and forth. And these are the type of games you love to see. Sunday night game, kick back, watch Mahomes and Carr go at it. And, Mahomes was able to come out on top, man. So, you got to give him credit. You got to give him credit for where credit is due. So what were your overall thoughts on the game? Are you more impressed with Las Vegas? Are you more impressed with Kansas City? Like, where are you feeling on both teams after coming out of that game?
I guess the way I see it is that oh wow, sorry, I'm watching the game and Cooper Kupp is having an insane first half, but personally, I think that Kansas City is showcasing that everybody is just not on their offensive level just because they don't have Patrick Mahomes. And that's just the end-all, be-all of the discussion. Like, Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in football. And at this point, you can argue it's not close, right? At this point, don't you think? Because, Aaron Rodgers was holding this title for a long time. And, it's just one of those things where once you get older and things get harder, it's not always something that is always going to be yours to hold on to. Like, we see it over time all the time. So I just gotta believe that there's not a quarterback that's doing the same things that Patrick Mahomes is doing. Like, even at the clip, he threw his second interception yesterday, right? And the first one he threw it was against the Raiders. So since week 2, he hasn't thrown an interception, and he throws one against the Raiders. Maybe they just know him better than everybody else, but that doesn't seem to matter too much in the grand scheme of things. So in reality, Kansas City is still the team to beat in my eyes for the Super Bowl. That is just the fact, and I don't see why else that would be any different. So with that said, the Raiders are kind of in a weird place, because I think that if they won last night, which they really could have gotten the game, they should. I feel like they played the game about as perfectly as possible until they left too much time on the clock for Mahomes to get down the field. But, a lot of those things you can never really know for sure. But they played it about as good as possible. At this point now, they're in a bad situation because a lot of teams in the AFC that would be wild card spots are like 6-3 minimum, right? Mm-hmm. So it's going to be hard for them to kind of catch up in that race without some timely losses and them really running the table in a sense. So They already got rid of their Kansas City game, so they don't have to worry about that too much. They do still have to play, I believe, Denver one more time at least. And Denver is an injured team, and Drew Lock has not played well, even though they did get a win against Miami. I wouldn't be shocked if they got in the playoffs, but I'm also remembering just what exactly the AFC playoff picture is looking like. And when you still have Cleveland, that's a 3-loss team, and you have, the Ravens right now are technically out of the playoff picture, which is actually insanity. Like when you think about it. But I think the Ravens still find a way to make it in the playoffs. And then you got to keep in mind that, the Bills are still there. Miami's still there. There's a lot of teams that can find themselves, available to make a run at this thing. And I think the Raiders might have missed their opportunity, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, that's potential. But like I said, with the AFC wildcard race being so close, I mean, literally a loss and they win. Now they're back in the spot. So it's really something, unless one of these teams or any of these teams in the AFC wildcard picture goes on a losing streak, everybody's going to have a chance for the last week. And we're just going to have to see who has tiebreakers. We're going to have to see who has, the head-to-heads, because we like some big matchups coming up. Miami has to play Las Vegas. They're both battling for a wild card spot. Whoever wins that game's going to get the leg up. We have, potentially, whatever happens with the AFC South, because remember, Colts, Titans play next week. Whoever loses, they're going to have a 4th loss. So there's a lot of things that could definitely come out of it and really, change some things up. So I think we're going to have to kind of see what happens when it comes down to it in that regard.
All right.
Also, we have to get into the news about, since we're in the AFC right now, we have to talk about Joe Burrow being out for the year with a torn ACL. What were your initial thoughts when you saw that about what happened to Joe Burrow? What do you think is the future moving forward for him in Cincinnati?
I just, I don't really know what to say, personally. I think that we all understood that their offensive line was atrocious. They knew it. Pretty sure Joe Burrow found out quick, fast, in a hurry that his offensive line was bad. I just don't know. I just don't know, personally, because I don't know what he looks like coming off an injury. Like, you say this about every single time. Like, you just never know what exactly is going to end up being, the case on a guy's career after injury like that. But we've seen it time and time again in the NFL where guys who depend on their speed kind of have issues coming back from stuff like that. But we saw Tom Brady come back from it. We've seen different quarterbacks kind of make their way from ACL tears. Like, Deshaun tore his, and he's looked probably better, personally. So, it just stinks. I just hope they can find someone to protect him, and they draft offensive linemen to protect him, so that way he can be what we expect Joe Burrow to end up being and reach his full potential. Because we're already seeing with Deshaun. Deshaun has to run for his life all the time. So no one likes seeing this about Deshaun Watson. So I can only imagine somebody who's less, athletic as Deshaun, this would not be ideal.
Yeah, definitely, man. And, the one thing to me, I think one thing I noticed when reading a lot of stuff and just, seeing the gauge of the NFL community, especially the Cincinnati community, a lot of people feel like the Bengals are very at fault here for putting Burrow in this position, knowing that their offensive line was going to get him beat up. Because I don't know if you remember the case of not Derek Carr, but David Carr, his brother, back in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
When he was drafted, I think they were just a new expansion team too. So, they're a new expansion team. It's hard to get a lot of talent because you're new, like literally. And so one reason why everybody says his career never worked out was because he got beat up every year because they couldn't protect him. And that basically, he became frightened in the pocket because he knew his offensive line couldn't protect. And, you know, even though he was able to play, he was beat up. And I think with Burrow, I think people are feeling like you should have put a better offensive line around him. You should have did more. You saw that, you know, your offensive can't block, but you're asking him to throw 40 times a game. I think Burrow was first in quarterback hits, second in sacks, led up to him. And so people are basically like, you know, the Bengals could easily have messed up their future with this injury if something happened. A lot of people feel like if the Bengals, you know, don't get it together, this could be bad. And that's one thing about the Bengals organization as a whole is they don't have the greatest reputation because, you know, their ownership hasn't always been the most willing to, quote unquote, support the team and things that they need. Like, think about it. You're playing in Ohio. It snows. What do you probably need? An indoor practice facility. He refused to give them that literally till just recently. And so they haven't always been managed the best. And so and that's why some people were worried about Burrow going there in the first place. And now that this injury has happened, I think that's why people are showing that emotional outburst towards Cincinnati. Because literally, if you're a franchise quarterback, which I think in their head after the games we've seen has established himself as the guy, unless he comes back a different player, if they do not get this offensive line right and Burrow comes right back from the ACL and gets beat up again, you know, people are just going to sit here and say they really could sit here and ruin Joe Burrow's career.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility for sure. But we're going to take a quick break and then we're going to come back and we're going to move on to the NFC as their storylines over on that side of the country as well. GSMC.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
All right, GSMC football listeners, fans, and solid peoples. It is the weekly, sometimes bi-weekly discussion of who should be fired in the NFL. Let me explain. Matt Patricia should be packing his bags right now. He shouldn't even be allowed to be anywhere near the Detroit city. The city of Detroit should not be allowed in. Matt Patricia should be gone. Doug Peterson, I think the Super Bowl is wearing off quickly. And at a certain point, you got to look at this and understand that, yeah, a lot of this is Wentz's fault. But the talent will always be there. So they're going to give Wentz another shot. But I don't think Doug Peterson gets another shot at this. I think Doug Peterson has to go. I think that Matt Patricia should be gone. I think Matt Nagy is on the list too. I think those are your top three. Unsurprisingly, two of them in the NFC North. I just don't understand what's going on the Bears front. I guess they really thought that they had it with Nick Foles, and then their offensive line, of course, is torn apart. So that adds to a whole other thing. But they're just not a good football team right now. And Detroit isn't either, even though they're injured all over the place. But it's not. We weren't sitting here saying, "Oh, look at Detroit" for the last 5 weeks either. So it's not good on that side.
Yeah, I definitely understand where you're coming from. In terms of Detroit, I'm sure they really missed DeAndre Swift this week, got out to a concussion, but still, just the way they played was very disappointing. They just the thing about Detroit is that they have some guys. They've accumulated some talent. And I think with the accumulation of some talent, like Kenny Golladay, like DeAndre Swift, Matthew Stafford, you know what I'm saying? You got some guys on defense, even though you did let go of Darius Slay this offseason. And then just, the fact that he's been so unsuccessful on the winning side of things his first 2 years. We've heard about the issues that he's had with players. It just feels like, Matt Patricia needs to go. It's one of those situations where it's just like, yeah, it just seems like they need to go in a new direction. And then when talking about the Eagles, the thing with the Eagles, and this is the issue, I think, with the situation. The Eagles are in a situation right now, they still, because they tied, they have a half game lead on everybody in the division. Because now everybody in NFC is 3-7 outside of the Eagles. They're 3-6-1. And I guess if you're management, is it possible, let's say they are still able to make the playoffs, is it one of those things where you're just kind of like, it doesn't matter because the team still didn't do well and we just happen to be in a bad division. And so we still need to look at this as a failure of a season because of that, unless he gets into the playoffs and somehow the Eagles make it to the Super Bowl or something like that. Because, I definitely understand Wentz probably will get another shot. Maybe they want to see, okay, what happens under a new regime. I'm sure everybody in the Eagles are kind of souring on Doug Peterson. We know how they soured on Andy Reid when he was taking the NFC Championship games. So we know they probably can sour on Doug Peterson, and it's just one of those things where if they let him go, I understand. It's not one of those, wow, that's crazy. It's just like, I understand. Because maybe that change is needed. Clearly, they need to change their entire training program because this is the second straight year they can't stay healthy at every position. So that's definitely understandable. And then in Chicago's situation as well, even, they just messed up at quarterback. That to me is the biggest thing. Because they have the defense. The defense, I feel bad for the defense because they're coming out here playing their butts off week after week, trying to keep the games to 20, 23 points, and their offense can't even get 20. They maybe can get 17, maybe 14, 13. As a defense, it's like, dang, we're doing what we're supposed to do. They can't do their job. And they really missed. They had a chance to get a better quarterback than Nick Foles, and for some reason, Matt Nagy said that's the guy. Sometimes, even though we see what Cam has done in New England, I sometimes wonder, what if Cam went to Chicago? Because he
would have no protection. He would look bad. That's the end of the discussion.
Well, of course, but he's not getting. But they're going to establish more of a running attack to protect him. Where with Nick Foles, he can't move, so he's just a sitting duck in the pocket. Always with the mobile quarterbacks, they're always like, well, at least he can move. But you never know. He could have had a more slightly successful statistic season. We don't know what would have happened. What if the Bears try to trade up for a guy? Maybe try to trade up for a quarterback. Maybe why didn't they pursue Tom Brady a little bit harder? These are all questions that people are like, why was Nick Foles just like, we're going to trade for him? Why was he the guy? And we know about Mitchell Trubisky. We don't know how long Nick Foles is going to be out. We know Mitchell was also hurt with an injury. We don't know if he'll be back either. But, just in those three situations, man, it's understandable why all of them probably need to go, probably also with Gase too. And, it's just, we're going to have to see how everything works out at the end of the season and how all these teams finish. But I definitely understand if all of these coaches do get let go.
Yeah, and it's weird because Matt Patricia's in a situation where he plays Thursday night, so they can't really fire him this week because the turnaround time to prepare for a game in Detroit would just be too much. They can't do it. However, right, if he wins, let's say he wins, right, then they're just stuck with him for like another week. When in reality, I think it's time to cut bait on Matt Patricia anyway. And that's just, it's an unfortunate series of events going on here for sure. So, as far as NFC teams, right, I would rather save, our rivalry week 1 of 2 for the last segment. But we are looking at the NFC East. Are the Giants the best team in the NFC East?
At the moment, you might have to say, yeah, they are the best team. Just because, is there any team that you look at in the NFC East and just think, wow, they're better? Technically, you could make the argument based off how quarterbacks have played. Daniel Jones has been the best one. Because remember, he's cleaned up turnovers too in the last couple of games, and that's why they've been successful. Defensively, they still have a defense that can make some plays. They have some decent wide receivers. They have plenty of flaws, of course, but everybody in this division has huge flaws. But it seems like they've gotten more control of their flaws than every other team. And so right now, I think you kind of have to say the Giants are the best team in the division. Because would you say Alex Smith in the football team? We know about the defensive line, but offensively they do struggle sometimes. We know about the Eagles and the turnovers and the injuries and just the lack of consistency. In Dallas, they had one of the best games of the year against Minnesota. People were calling it an upset, but you got to remember both of these teams have like 3-4 wins each. So it's not like they beat a great team. It's just Minnesota play better. So I think you got to go with the Giants, man.
Yeah, and let's remind ourselves that the Cowboys, although no one's really out of this division, and it's just it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. No one's really out of the division, but everybody's kind of out of the division at the same time. The Cowboys are 3-7. Everybody's 3-7 besides the Eagles, who are 3-6-1. Whoop-de-doo, right? The Cowboys could jump at the top of the division with a win against Washington, and that right there would be an interesting take on all that's going on, because people still thought before the Dak injury that the Cowboys should still win this division because it's that horrible. Here's the remaining games for the Cowboys. Washington, then they have to go up against the Ravens on Thursday night. So 2 back-to-back Thursday night games. Then they play the Bengals with no Joe Burrow. They play the 49ers, who are all banged up. They play the Eagles, and then they play the Giants. So 2 big divisional games at the end of the year. And I don't see, if they don't win at Washington, the season's done, essentially. Because any of the remaining games besides, I guess, the Bengals are legitimately a toss-up, and the Ravens should destroy the Cowboys. Granted, the Cowboys played against the Steelers, and they almost pulled out a win. So I can't say it's the give me. But that Ravens defense is really good, and the Cowboys are just not great defensively still. They still give up way too many points all the time. So that is, in fact, the case, or the fact of the matter. So I'm hesitant to say that the Cowboys have a chance, is what I'm trying to say. And if you look at New York's rest of the schedule, they have the Bengals coming up this coming week. They played the Seahawks, whose defense is atrocious. They played Cardinals, whose defense isn't that great. They played the Browns, which is a weird team. They play the Ravens themselves, and then they have the Cowboys. I'm more of a fan of this Giants schedule than I am way more than a fan of the Cowboys. So out of those two teams, those are probably your two NFC East winners. Everybody give a good clap. Yay. But the 6-10 win this division.
I would probably say, how many games left in the year? Like five games left for every team. Yeah, I think. I mean, that means you're winning 3 out of your last 5. So yeah, I think that would definitely win the division. Definitely, honestly, 5-11 could win the division, or 5-10-1. But if you're the Eagles, but yeah, definitely 5-6 wins. That'll probably get you. In the playoffs for sure.
I have to tend I'll probably agree to that tentatively. The Packers, real quick, we just talked about them technically earlier in the first block, but Packers take a big time loss considering that they lose their number 1 spot in the NFC. The Saints do have to play the Chiefs at some point. Do you think that Green Bay could continue to clean up games and get back in the first seed? Or is this one of those things where they might end up dropping a couple games here? Because it seems to me that they are not as, sound as what they seem. They play Chicago next, so, whatever. They play the Eagles, which is a weird team. The Eagles might do their Eagles thing and get a win. They do play the Panthers, who are not as always the tough out or the easy out as people might seem. And they have the Titans right after that. So there are some potential games that can be lost here. But for the most part, they're all winnable games for the remainder of the season. So do you think that they can get back and, let's say, they end the season off on a 13-3 and they just win out the rest of the season? Or do you find yourself thinking that there might be a couple more losses on the way?
With Green Bay, I really never know, to be honest with you, man. Like, they almost lost to Jacksonville, and then they lost to the Colts, and there is a formula to beat this team. If you are physical, you have a chance. They are not a physical football team whatsoever. You've seen it with Vikings. You've seen it with Tampa. When you get rough and ragged, they struggle. They're a finesse team. They are, don't touch our receivers. We'll push you off blocks. No touch on Jones, and we'll light you up. But if you're willing to get in their face and grind, they struggle in those games. Remember last year when they were 13-3, some people said they were a fraudulent 13-3. And if they go 13, if they went out the rest of the year, it's hard for me to think they wouldn't say the exact same thing. They are fraudulent 13-3 because it's like, when it gets to the top teams, I can't sit here and say Green Bay is better, even though they may have a better record. Like if they play Tampa, we saw how that went. What would change necessarily? Are they going to become more physical all of a sudden overnight? Even with Seattle can be a physical team if they get the running backs up. We saw what Carlos Hyde did for that offense. If they can run the ball down Seattle's throat, they can beat them. Everybody even said it last year. If Seattle had healthy running backs, they would have beat Green Bay. If you talk about maybe, the Saints, Alvin Kamara, they run it with him, beat Green Bay. Even though y'all lost him earlier this year, it's not like that game was a blood. Y'all could beat Green Bay. Honestly, if y'all are getting better, they're getting worse. So, to me, I wouldn't be surprised if they went out, but I don't think it's going to tell me anything different about them. I don't think it's going to show me anything until we get to the playoffs and they go into a physical ball game and they win it.
Yeah, it's a toss up for me, but We're going to take our final break, and we're going to move into the big topic of the discussion here, and that is to talk about Taysom Hill. GSMC will be right back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
All right, Brice, listeners, friends, and family of the GSMC Football Podcast. It is the moment that we've been waiting for a year on this podcast. The inevitable if-then situation, the worst-case scenario. Taysom Hill started at quarterback for the Saints, and we won the game. And it was against the Falcons, who Roddy White was talking a whole lot of trash. Roddy was talking about a gadget quarterback, a trickster, a guy who can't really play the position, and they got outplayed. He beat him badly too. I guess we all forgot that our pass rush was, we're clicking on all different cylinders, man. Our pass rush was getting involved. We looked really good on the defensive side of the ball. This is without Marshawn Lattimore. Man, but Taysom Hill. In fact, I'll let you have the floor first before I get in, because I have a lot of my takes are pretty calm. Like this is not about to be hot take Jake Ethan here on the pod, but I got to know from a Falcons fan's perspective, what does this game mean to you as you have now officially lost to Taysom Hill?
Well, first, if you actually want to know what the Falcons community is saying, we are saying fire Dirk Cotter, because that was absolutely terrible game plan that he executed against you guys. And also Julio was hurt. But that was obviously a terrible game plan he executed against you guys. So that's the first thing. Second, you're welcome, Ethan, because we have officially gave you your franchise quarterback for next year, because Sean Payton is in love with him. And winning this game, all this did for him was basically solidify, all right, when Drew's gone, Taysom Hill's the guy. So, like what that page I sent you that tweet of said, the Mormon Tebow, y'all got him next year.
The Mormon Tebow.
And so, listen, I'm kind of at that point with the Falcons season where I'm just watching. I'm not really emotionally charged up or anything like that. It's just kind of like, listen, we know the deal. We need to restart anyway. I'm just waiting to the end of the season to go ahead and restart this whole thing. Yeah, it'd be great to beat the Saints. I mean, we get another chance in about 2 weeks to play you guys. Hopefully we play better in that game. We have some pride. And it's like, all right, guys, if anything, let's not lose to the Saints twice in 1 year, with Taysom Hill, because he'll be there again in 2 weeks. Drew Brees is on IR. He won't be back for that game. So, hopefully we just come out. Hopefully Julio's in a better shape. Hopefully we come out with a better game plan. Hopefully the offensive line plays better. Because realistically, in the first half, realistically, our defense didn't even play that bad against you guys. Defensively, we played well enough to win. It's just if your offense is giving you nothing, I mean, you're eventually going to break on defense, and that's what happened. That's why in the second half, that's when y'all really took advantage. And so that's pretty much, my view. I know that you've been very just, I don't want to say concerned, but very just curious about how this quarterback situation is going to play out for you. Because I know you've kind of been, I don't want to use the word resistant, but kind of like, I don't know. I still want to go outside and see if we can find someone else after Drew than going with Taysom. And potentially maybe you rather prefer Jameis instead. But I guess now I'm going to give the floor to you, and you can give your thoughts on the situation and what you think the future of Saints football is going to look like now that it looks like that your division rival has given you your franchise quarterback.
I think the decision is up in the air still. Like, I don't think this is cemented that Taysom is the starter for the foreseeable future. I think at the very least, all this means is Sean Payton is a genius. Sean Payton is the guy. And everybody who thinks that they're an armchair GM, everybody thinks who can sit there and say, I'm a coach on Reddit, who can sit there and question every decision a head coach makes in the NFL. Well, here it is. This is the big slap in the face. This is a win for coaches. Coaches got a dub today because as soon as Taysom Hill was announced as a starter, myself included, I was confused. I thought for certain that this is just gamesmanship. This is just to confuse. This is just to confuse the Falcons, to make them think that Taysom Hill is going to be the starter, and then Jameis was going to come in and finish out the game. All the reports were true. Everybody was ready for it, it seemed like, mentally in the media standpoint, and it happened. And what ended up happening was he played fine. Taysom played fine. As soon as the game slowed down for him, I think the biggest thing was seeing that Taysom Hill can throw. I think because we haven't really seen Taysom Hill throw the ball. And they said one of the most interesting things on the broadcast was that Taysom Hill as a player, he said that the biggest thing was that he didn't want to make a mistake because, when he first comes in before the whole start, he doesn't like to come in and make mistakes because he only gets so many times to be out there under center. So being a full-time quarterback now in this situation, he gets the ball, he gets a lot more chances so he can throw the ball more and not have to feel like he has to be perfect and make every perfect decision. He still fumbles way too much. I think he's fumbled probably every game, personally. Either he gets it back or the defense gets it. But ball security is a pretty big issue with him, and that's just been an ongoing thing. But as a runner, you can just see he's not the fastest, right? He's not Lamar. He's not the quickest. He's not Kyler Murray, of course, at all. But there is probably not another running or quarterback in the NFL that's going to try and run over a linebacker twice the size than Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill looks to finish runs and make you earn the hit that you're going to put on him. Now, he does like to step outside now just because of the situation at hand, right? He doesn't want to hurt himself and thus compromise the team. But he's still going to, fight for every yard as hard as he can. But the real thing is this. Taysom Hill probably threw the ball as well as half the starting quarterbacks in the NFL this week. He had some long balls taken away from him. Like, he had a touchdown pass that was taken away by a penalty, and it was 60 yards. So let's keep in mind, I don't think the Saints have had a 60-yard air yards pass since 2016, maybe even 2015. I don't think the Falcons even fathomed seeing a pass go beyond the 30-yard line in the Saints uniform. I don't think they've seen that in years. So for the fact of the matter is, a lot of players for the Saints have become unlocked. It's no longer the Drew Brees. No, Drew Brees dink and dunk. Oh, man. Flat route Drew. Oh, man. Slant boy, which, by the way, just retire it, okay? Retire the idea that Michael Thomas is a slant boy because he was down in the trenches. He was catching passes beyond the sticks, 20 yards deep, 15 yards deep, 30 yards deep. He had a bad drop that was like a 30-yard pass. It's over. It never was right. You all just hated it because the media forgets about Julio because the Falcons are trash, and it's just unfortunate that he's always there. It's not Michael Thomas's fault. Michael Thomas is a good player. He's not a slant boy. End it now. And that's it. Also, Kamara got his first touchdown against the Falcons for the first time in his career. Interesting statistic.
That is interesting. Yeah, I mean, okay. So first, I think if there was one player on your team that would go to the GM, go to Sean Payton, and say, keep Taysom Hill, it's going to be Michael Thomas because he knows he'll throw it to me 20 times a game. So that's the first thing. That's the only thing I would think out of that game I would be worried about Taysom Hill is he's going to lock on to a guy. Maybe that just has to do with him getting more rapport with the other receivers. But, he kind of has, we know Mike is there. So I'm going to go to Mike. And then if somebody else just happens to be over, I'll go there. Second, I think, yes, it may still be up in the air. But as you know, if y'all go win the next two and he continues to play well, Sean Payton will do everything in his power to make him starting quarterback. And I think you know that deep inside because you know he wants him to be starting quarterback anyway. So
you mean long term or against the Chiefs?
I'm talking about long term.
Oh, no.
Because
I don't know.
Because we were hearing this past off season that he was like, hey, if Drew retires, he's ready to make that change. I just don't see why would he change off of it if he sees good things. That's why I say that. So, and then we'll see what y'all do with Jameis. I mean, he's the big wild card. I mean, there was a report before the game that some players rather have Jameis play.
Yeah, I don't know where that came from, but it seemed like everybody was pretty happy for Taysom. That's all I have to say.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, hey, the one thing like you said about the deep ball, either with Jameis or Taysom, let's be honest. You said the players are unlocked. The offense is unlocked because now y'all can do much more than what y'all can do when Drew is behind center. Let's just be honest here. Y'all have to be slant, dink, and duck with Drew. Where with Taysom and Jameis, we can say, okay, Emmanuel Sanders, go deep. Michael Thomas, go deep. Everybody, go deep. Hey, cross the route over the middle, deep. And we can make that big play. And now defenses that have been game planning on the Saints for 2-3 years saying, just defend everything short, says, oh, snap, we actually got to defend deep now. If not, they'll beat us over the top. If, Sean Payton, knowing how smart he is as an offensive guy, he'll probably try to low teams in. He's like, no, let's just keep dinking and dunking and then go over the top because now he knows I can actually do that now. So this isn't a shot at Drew, though. We're just saying the offense now can be much more explosive, going forward. So, it's a good, I would like to say, a good preview for all Saints fans of what the offense could be after Drew Brees.
I understand, but I also still, as Jared Goff just threw a pick. Bad one, too. I will say that in all actuality, I don't think that Taysom Hill will be given the starter role in the offseason that easily. They're going to go through the draft process. They're going to go see who they can sign in free agency as far as the team. They got to get people paid. But I think the biggest thing here's the biggest thing. Taysom Hill is probably going to be the one who gets the first look next year. He is going to be the one who gets the first look. I think that if James wants to come back, he'll be allowed to come back. But I think this is going to be it. He gets the first look. He'll get the first team reps, but I don't think it'll be set in stone until really we see more. Like from one game, this is a great this feels like it confirms some things for Sean Payton that what he was seeing, but we're not out of the woods yet, and let's not try and crown Taysom as the Brees successor just yet because I think there's more proving to come. I think that's the biggest thing. But other than that, that's your GSMC Football Podcast here. Thank you all for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share the podcast. I think that, at least for me, I think we're done this week. Now that I think about it, I think Thanksgiving break.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
the podcast later of the week.
Yeah. So you'll see me back here Tuesday with Brice covering all the things for Thanksgiving games to Sunday games, all that, and then some. GSMC. We'll see you all next week.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.